and we're picking back up on Chapter 10 of Burying the Boys, the CIA, the Mob, and America's Secret History by Daniel Hopsicker. Gordon's List. Were it not for an often remarked upon quirk of human nature, one large chunk of what little is today known about the story of Burying the Boys would have sunk back into the shrouded mists and murky deeps of the official story. Today, our understanding of the importance of the CIA Front Double Check Corporation as a link between the Bay of Pigs fiasco and the Kennedy assassination comes only because of the oft-cited female complaint about men that most of them can be legally classified as cleaning impaired. The male in question is Gordon Novell, regarded as the CIA's man in New Orleans in the early 1960s. Gordon had beat a fast retreat out of town after Jim Garrison's probe discovered that he had been sheep-dipped into their midst as a spy for the agency, a charge which Novell today freely admits. After Novell fled New Orleans, his vacant apartment was rented out to two young co-eds, who predictably cleaned it from top to bottom before they would consent to move in. While giving the kitchen a thorough going over, they found a letter wedged under a plastic drain board on the kitchen sink written by Novell to his CIA handler. The girls thought it might be important and gave it to a reporter for the New Orleans State's Item, who recognized its significance and brought it to the attention of Garrison. Jim Garrison called Gordon Novell, with typical hyperbole, the most important witness in history. Others were equally impressed with Novell's historical importance. One reporter dubbed him the most slippery, loquacious fugitive in the history of American jurisprudence. Novell was carrying some heavy-duty secrets when he fled Garrison's investigation, related to having worked closely with David Ferrie and anti-Castro exiles in New Orleans. He headed first to the Virginia home of the Central Intelligence Agency, and then to Canada, where, true to the agency playbook, he denied all ties to the CIA. He later changed his story and admitted that he had served as an intermediary between the CIA and Cuban exiles, but his attorney stressed his CIA activities had absolutely nothing to do with the assassination of President Kennedy. Written before Garrison's probe was public knowledge. That letter reads like a chapter from a Tom Clancy novel. I took the liberty of writing you direct and apprising you of current situation, expecting you to forward this through appropriate channels, Novell writes. Our connection and activity of that period involves individuals presently about to be indicted as conspirators in Garrison's investigation. Garrison had subpoenaed myself and an associate to testify before his grand jury on matters which may be classified top secret. We have temporarily avoided one subpoena, not to reveal double-check activities or associate them with this mess. The letter continued. We want out of this thing before Thursday. Our attorneys have been told to expect another subpoena to appear and testify on this matter. The Fifth Amendment and/or immunity and legal tactics will not suffice. Novell warns that Garrison may expose actions which individuals connected with Double Check Corporation in Miami in the first quarter of 1961, which involves a secret important enough to lie to the FBI about. Mr. Garrison is in possession of sworn portions of this testimony. He is unaware of Double Check's involvement in this matter, but has strong suspicions. I have been questioned extensively by local FBI recently as to whether or not I was involved with Double Check's parent holding corporation during that time. My reply on 5 queries was negative. Bureau, unaware of Double Check association in this matter. lest anyone rashly conclude he is expendable. The impish Novell then writes that he has a form of insurance policy. Our attorneys and others are in possession of complete sealed files containing all information concerning this matter. In the event of our sudden departure, either accidental or otherwise, they are instructed to simultaneously release same for public scrutiny in different areas. While double check connection is what we're interested in here, Gordon Novell tells such colorful tales that a few points should be made before moving on. When Novell fled to Montreal after visiting Langley, he was traveling a well-worn path. Garrison's office had evidence indicating Montreal was visited by David Ferry before the assassination in the company of Clay Shaw and A.J. Hiddell on an alias of Lee Harvey Oswald's, and was the North American headquarters of a group of Eastern European and Cuban exiles linked to the CIA through Major Louis Bloomfield. When Barry Seal is arrested on major drug felony charges in Florida more than a decade later, it will be in the company of some of these shadowy Montreal underworld figures with links to the Kennedy assassination like Norman Rothman. But the clearest illustration of the covert world in New Orleans that young Barry Seal moved in, often visiting the same Playboy club favored by Novell, is provided by the list of things Novell told Garrison. He would be willing to testify about it if granted immunity. The list includes international fraud, public and official bribery, intimidation, the probable murder of David Ferry, seditious treason, mysterious intelligence activities from November 1959 to date in the southern quadrant of the USA and certain islands off Florida, hot war games and cold munitions transfers, 10 Canadian vampire jet fighters, and Cuban Anglo-French sabotage affairs of the early 1960s. Even 3 decades later is still quite an impressive list, so we asked him about it. Gordon, 10 vampire jets? There was a whole bunch of Canadian vampire jets sitting down here in New Orleans then, he replied. Some people were trying to sell them to anti-Castro Cubans who were going to fly them out of Miami. Controversy was something I was going to create so I could come home, because being away was costing me money. Seeing Garrison's list, Garrison had remarked, "These are all intriguing aspects of Novell's career as a U.S. intelligence agent, and I'd love to hear about them, especially his knowledge of seditious treason." In a preview of the financial fraud later associated with spook activities in the 80s in New Orleans states, items reported that one of Novell's duties prior to the Bay of Pigs was to operate the Evergreen Advertising Agency as a front for CIA communications. With funds funneled to him by the CIA, Novell states, he prepared special radio commercials used on 300 stations in the United States and Canada. Their cryptographic messages, he claims, were to alert agents to the invasion date. The commercials advertised aluminum Christmas trees, he says, and the key alert code names were Star Christmas trees and Holiday trees. In late 1960, $72,000 of fraudulent radio time was placed. Evergreen Advertising, that was me and Sal D'Angrosso. We had a giant idea, Novell told us. I was into promoting things, can you tell? And we knew that radio stations are crooked during the holidays as regards to whether your radio spots got aired or not. Radio stations are universally crooks at Christmas time. The only way to check them is to monitor or have access to their logs, so Sal knew if they've got it sold out, they won't even run it. So we've created a phony advertising company, put 4A advertising across the top, and got 30-day billing from radio stations cause we looked so legit. So we billed our $500,000 worth of ads saying, buy this 6-foot Christmas tree. Then we put a corporation behind Evergreen Advertising Agency, so you have to come through shell after shell to collect your money. And we made $2 for every tree we sold on the radio and never paid a penny for advertising. Novell sued Jim Garrison. After Garrison did a Playboy interview, but then he received a communication from FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover, Novell says, letting him know of the Bureau's displeasure at his filing suit against former FBI agent Garrison. Novell, unintimidated, went instead to James Angleton, the CIA's counterintelligence chief, who gave him pictures to show Hoover. Novell insists of old Edgar with his lips pursed around something they shouldn't have been pursed around. Homo activity, huh? This was enough, he says, grinning, to relieve him of any further pressure from the FBI. The FBI got revenge with an FBI document that made news in 1998, which revealed that Novell, while the CIA had tried to doctor photographs to make it appear that Oswald had met with Fidel Castro. When that effort failed, Novell tried to doctor the picture to make it look as if Jack Ruby met with Castro. Gordon was nothing if not flexible. The discovery of the Novell letter by two co-eds may someday perhaps be equaled in importance by the discovery in the safe of a Barry Seals widow of a photograph with a dozen well-dressed men in black suits and skinny jeans taken on January 22, 1963, in a nightclub in Mexico City. Barry Seal left the picture to his wife, Debbie, when she turned over Barry Seal's records to a 7-man cleanup crew, which visited her in early 1995. The photo, which she considered a keepsake, remained in her safe. A good thing, too. We've seen the eagerness with which the minions of our government's investigative services confiscate inconvenient evidence which never again sees the light of day. The picture is remarkable photographic evidence of what it was. The picture is remarkable photographic evidence of what it was the boys were up to that fateful year of 1963 in Mexico City. We knew nothing about an individual named William Seymour, for example, until he seemed to match in another picture taken in 1963, the photo taken in Mexico City nightclub. Only then did we learn that Seymour was well known as being a long-term Guy Bannister employee, working for Double Check in New Orleans as a recruiter of pilots for the CIA. All by itself is truly earth-shaking news. If the biggest drug smuggler in American history was consorting as early as 1963 with a man whose job was recruiting pilots into the CIA, the massive drug smuggling through Mena, Arkansas, takes a whole new sinister light. William Seymour, we found, is in virtually all of the literature about the Kennedy assassination. He was the same size and weight as Lee Harvey Oswald and resembled him enough to become the focus of speculation that he had been the second Oswald, using Oswald's name to criminally implicate him and hopefully Fidel Castro as well in the assassination. According to Garrison, Seymour and two of his running mates, Lauren Hall and Lawrence Howard, were elements of a pilot pieced together by anti-Castro Cuban exiles and what Garrison called lower echelon CIA operatives that cumulatively fashioned the weapon that struck down JFK. The second famous operative appearing in that Mexico City nightclub photo with Barry Seal is Frank Sturgis, Bay of Pigs operative. Watergate burglar, and a man who researchers say made a written confession of his participation in the Kennedy assassination to a cardinal of the Catholic Church before he died. In the picture, he is hiding his face, though his swept back pompadour gives him away. But by far the most intriguing person clearly visible in the Mexico City nightclub, and he's still alive, is Felix Rodriguez, one of the CIA's most vicious assassins, whose long list of murderers includes that of Che Guevara in Bolivia in the 60s. What was Rodriguez doing in Mexico City in January of 1963, at a time when his official bio has him at U.S. Army training at Fort Benning, Georgia? Ask him. He denied being there to us. But when people lie, it is always for a reason. He had listed, for example, to Leighton Martins, a David Ferry intimate, lie to us about even Ferry's whereabouts at that time of the Bay of Pigs. David Ferry could not have been at the Bay of Pigs. He was with me, listening to a shortwave radio, said Martins, straight-faced. Why would anyone dissemble about the activities of a dead man, especially when there was a dead man's own testimony to refer to? From the House Committee on Assassinations, Ferry, as a contract agent for the CIA, claimed to have flown on several hazardous missions into Cuba. One on the night of the Bay of Pigs, where he landed. Ferry's role as a CIA agent was confirmed in 1975 when Victor Marchetti, former deputy assistant to Richard Helms, said that Helms had disclosed in discussions during Garrison's investigation that Ferry had in fact been employed by the CIA. CIA Technical Services Officer Robert Morrow said he'd been on a flight with David Ferry into Cuba on the day of the invasion. I was glad it was David Ferry at the control of the beach. In civilian life, he was an Eastern Airlines pilot, and I was comforted by his confident and conscientious manner at the controls. He was a very thorough and clearly very competent. Ferry even addressed an audience after the Bay of Pigs and announced that JFK should be shot after being invited to speak on the Bay of Pigs investigation failure before the New Orleans chapter of the Military Order of World Wars. Present were witnesses who said Ferry was introduced as a pilot in the invasion and spoke so emotionally about Kennedy's double cross of the invasion force that several people walked out of the meeting. Covering up what is already on the record always inspires suspicion. Why? What secret is so big that it requires lying about almost 40 years later? We didn't know. What we did know was that we had photographic proof of some men in black, and they were all wearing black suits who looked to be involved in some highly profitable intrigue. So we began to look at the record of lucrative enterprises that were being traded on the Central Exchange of the highly active Caribbean black market. And there, in the secret history of American covert operatives engaging in smuggling, gun running, and murder for hire, is where we finally found our answer. And that's it for today.